Welcome to another deep dive from the Nepalese Diaspora Network. It's your one-stop shop for everything.
Yeah.
News, views, and insights, and all that good stuff for our global Nepalese community.
That's right.
And if you've been keeping up with our newsletter, you know that we like to kind of deep dive into a lot of the stuff we're going to cover today.
Yeah.
So today we are taking a really focused look at some of the most significant developments happening right now in Nepal,
Yeah.
pulling from a lot of the sources that you guys have shared with us.
Absolutely.
We want to make sure to provide you with an update that's concise, but also packed with information. And we'll definitely be keeping an eye on the clock.
That sounds good.
So we can, make the most of your time.
Exactly.
So we've got this really rich collection of insights spanning across various sectors. I mean, we're talking everything from the economy to social and cultural shifts. So let's just jump right in.
Yeah.
Maybe a good place to start would be with the economic stuff. There seems to be a lot to unpack there.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. Remittances. I know that's always a hot topic for the Nepalese diaspora.
Yeah.
And in the first 7 months of the current fiscal year, Nepal received a whopping 900 billion rupees.
Wow, 900 billion Nepalese rupees. That's huge.
Yeah.
And I think I saw in the sources that it's like a 7.3% increase compared to last year around the same time. But the dollar terms were a little bit lower at 5.3%. I wonder what's the story there?
Well, it's fascinating because it directly correlates with the number of Nepalese going abroad to work. In fact, during the same period we're talking about, over 230,000 people got that final labor approval to work overseas.
Oh, wow.
And another 162,000 renew their permits. So both those numbers are actually higher than what we saw the previous year.
Interesting.
And it just highlights, the ongoing reliance on overseas employment. And it's a major factor in those remittance inflows. Now, on one hand, it provides that much-needed immediate support to so many families back home. Yeah. But on the other, it begs a much bigger question about Nepal's long-term development.
Right. How do we create more opportunities within Nepal?
Exactly. So that it's not just about relying on remittances.
Right. It's a complex issue.
It is.
One thing I did want to touch upon. We saw in the sources that foreign exchange reserves are at a record high.
Yeah, I think that's good news for Nepal's financial standing.
Yeah.
By mid-February of this year, Nepal's foreign exchange reserves actually reached a historic peak of 2,369 billion rupees.
Wow.
That's a massive 16.1% jump from just mid-July of last year.
That's a huge increase. But what does that actually mean for the average person?
Yeah.
What does that translate to on the ground?
Well, think of it like a safety net. Those reserves mean Nepal has enough foreign currency to cover about 17.2 months' worth of merchandise imports.
Wow.
And 14.4 months of both goods and services imports.
That's a lot.
So basically, even if their export earnings suddenly stopped, Nepal has a significant buffer to keep paying for things they buy from other countries.
Wow.
For well over a year.
That's a big relief.
It is. It's a really positive sign. And on top of that, both the balance of payments and current account remain in surplus. So that signals a, pretty healthy external financial position for Nepal overall.
Okay, that gives us some context. Moving on to commercial banks, I think I saw that their profits were up, but maybe not as much as the reserve.
Yeah, it was a much more modest increase, only 1.62% rise in net profit for the first 7 months of the fiscal year.
So still a rise, but a smaller one.
Exactly. Nabil Bank led the pack with the highest profit, but several other banks actually saw their profits decrease.
Oh, so it's not uniform across the board. What's causing that difference?
Well, the lower profits for some banks seem to be mainly due to two things. The banks are earning less interest income, and they're having to set aside more money to cover potential losses from loans that aren't being repaid. We call those non-performing loans.
Oh, boy.
So when a bank has a lot of those, they have to put aside extra funds just in case.
Okay, so even though the banking sector overall is still doing okay, there are some maybe some warning signs there about how loans are being managed.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. There are definitely some underlying challenges there that are worth keeping an eye on.
Definitely. Okay, switching gears a little bit. One of the things that I found really interesting in the materials is the growing Nepalese community in Japan.
Oh, yeah, that's a pretty big shift. As of June of last year, the number of Nepalese people in Japan actually surpassed the number of Brazilians living there,
Wow.
making them the 5th largest foreign community in Japan, with a total of 206,898 people.
Wow, that's a lot. It sounds like it's a rapidly growing community too.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about an annual increase of somewhere between 30,000 and 50,000 people. Many are coming on student visas, which, often allow them to work as well. And quite a few of them are finding jobs in restaurants, particularly in the Kyushu region.
Interesting. So it's a significant and growing presence of Nepalese people in Japan.
It is. It really shows how widespread the Nepalese diaspora has become.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Yeah.
On a slightly more serious note, we did get some updates on the situation with Bipin Joshi,
Oh, right.
who is the Nepalese citizen being held hostage in Gaza. Do we know what's happening with the diplomatic efforts to get him back?
Well, Prime Minister Ali has been quite active in trying to get Joshi released. He recently reached out to Egyptian President al-Sisi to specifically ask for Egypt's help.
Okay.
He also acknowledged and expressed gratitude for the role Egypt played in mediating the ceasefire and the hostage deal between Israel and Hamas.
And what was President al-Sisi's response to that request?
He reassured Prime Minister Ali that Egypt is committed to helping secure the release of all the remaining hostages, including Joshi,
Okay.
and that these efforts will be prioritized as part of the next stages of the hostage exchange agreement.
So there's still hope that he'll be able to return home safely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's definitely hope.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, Shifting gears a little bit, I do want to talk about some potential challenges in Nepal's health sector,
Oh, right.
particularly in light of this freeze on U.S. aid that we're seeing.
Right.
What are the implications of that based on what you've gathered?
Well, the U.S. government's decision to temporarily halt pretty much all foreign assistance has raised some concerns. You see, after President Trump returned to the White House, there's been this 3-month suspension of aid,
Right.
which includes programs run by USAI, and they've been a major supporter of Nepal's healthcare system. So this
Wow.
pause has affected a number of important healthcare programs, especially those focused on training.
Oh, so it directly impacts the development of medical professionals.
Exactly. Now, the Ministry of Health is looking into ways to adapt. They're considering doing more virtual meetings and training.
Okay.
But a lot of health officials have expressed serious doubts about how effective that can really be, especially for essential, hands-on, life-saving skills.
Hmm.
Some things just can't be taught effectively online.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Like, they specifically mention skilled birth attendance and managing complications during labor as skills that are really difficult to teach virtually.
Right, yeah.
You really need that practical experience.
Absolutely.
So that's a big concern.
Yeah. And I think we also saw in the materials, it wasn't just this aid freeze. There was also talk of potential budget cuts in Nepal's own healthcare system, right?
Yes, that's right. There are reports that the government's considering reducing the healthcare budget by about 3 billion rupees for the next fiscal year. And public health experts are really worried that this combination of reduced international aid and potential domestic budget cuts could have really serious long-term consequences for the overall healthcare system in Nepal.
Yeah, that definitely sounds worrying.
Yeah, it is. The programs that could be affected include really crucial training for medical officers and nurses, things like neonatal care, outbreak investigation, various surveys and awareness campaigns related to things like maternal and child health, nutrition, and infectious diseases. So these are all really vital aspects of public health.
Yeah, so it's a pretty concerning picture for the healthcare sector in Nepal.
It is.
Okay. I did want to move on to something a bit more, I guess, unexpected.
Okay.
It was fascinating to read about the growing trend of cultivating lowland crops in Nepal's highlands.
Oh, yeah. That's a really cool example of adaptation.
Yeah.
Because of rising temperatures, farmers in the higher altitude areas are now able to successfully grow crops that were traditionally only found in the lower regions.
It's incredible.
I know. It's really interesting. A prime example is humla. Farmers there are now growing things like tomatoes, cauliflower, and peas,
Wow.
which is not only boosting their local economy,
Yeah.
but also lessening their reliance on expensive imports from other areas.
Yep.
We're even seeing the beginnings of rice cultivation in high-altitude villages like Papu in Mugu.
Wow. That's incredible. It's really amazing to see communities finding ways to adapt to the changing climate.
It is. It's a testament to their resilience and ingenuity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
But are there any potential downsides to this shift?
that's a really good question, and it's something that agricultural experts are keeping a close eye on.
Okay.
Because while there are clear and immediate benefits for the farmers, there are also potential risks.
Okay.
Introducing non-native species and hybrid varieties can have an impact on the soil health
Right.
and the native crops.
Okay.
There are worries about soil depletion, potential introduction of new pests and diseases that the highland ecosystems might not be prepared to handle.
Right. It's like disrupting a delicate balance that was already there.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
it needs to be approached with caution.
Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
good reminder that even positive changes can have, complex effects that we need to be mindful of.
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's talk about infrastructure for a bit. There's this proposed Raxol-Kathmandu railway.
Oh, right.
What's the latest on that?
Well, Nepal's still looking to India for both financial and technical support to really see if this project is feasible.
Yeah.
This would be a pretty big undertaking. A direct rail link connecting the Indian border city of Raxol all the way to Kathmandu.
Yeah.
Now, the survey report suggests a pretty long payback period of 25 years,
Okay.
mainly due to a somewhat low financial rate of return. They're estimating it at 4.81%.
Oh, so there are some economic challenges to consider.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The project's facing some pretty big hurdles, mainly because of the estimated cost of construction. We're talking upwards of 400 billion rupees.
Mm-hmm.
A big chunk of that cost is going to be for building approximately 42 kilometers of tunnels and 124 large bridges.
Wow. That's a massive project.
Yeah, it is. And the fact that Nepal's current bank interest rates are higher than the projected financial return on the railway poses a significant financial challenge.
Right. So it's a really complex project.
It is.
And lots to think about before moving ahead.
Definitely.
Okay. We did get a snapshot of the Nepal Stock Exchange. Can you walk us through some of the top players?
Sure. As of March 12th of this year, the top 10 companies listed on the Nepal Stock Exchange, the NEPSE by market capitalization, are Bishal Bazaar Company, Nepal Reinsurance Company, Nepal Dorsanchar Company, Nabil Bank, Citizen Investment Trust, Himalayan Reinsurance, Global IME Bank, Everest Bank, Nepal Investment Mega Bank, and Nepal Life Insurance Co., Ltd.
Okay, so that list gives us a sense of the major players in the Nepalese stock market.
Exactly. And as you can see, there's a strong presence from the financial institutions and insurance providers.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of regulations, I know there's been a big move to control the sale of some key antibiotics.
Oh, yeah. That's a really important step they've taken to protect public health.
Yeah.
Nepal's drug regulator, the Department of Drug Administration, has banned the sale of 6 critical antibiotics in pharmacies outside of hospitals.
Okay.
So we're talking about meropenem, polymyxin B, piperacillin, plus tazobactam, vancomycin, colistin, and linezolid.
Wow, that's a pretty serious ban.
It is, but it's all about preventing the overuse and misuse of these antibiotics, which are really considered a last resort for severe infections that are treated in hospitals.
Right, yeah.
And there's this growing global concern about antimicrobial resistance, where
Yeah.
bacteria become resistant to these drugs.
Right, it's almost like a silent pandemic.
Exactly. And that makes infections so much harder to treat, sometimes impossible. So by restricting the sale of these drugs to just hospitals, the hope is to preserve their effectiveness for when they're really needed
Right.
and to try to slow down the development of resistance.
Yeah, it's like a preventative measure.
It is. It's all about safeguarding public health in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I did want to talk about some issues with the House Public Accounts Committee.
Oh.
What's going on there?
Well, the information you've shared suggests that there are concerns about the Public Accounts Committee, or the PAC,
Okay.
which is a crucial parliamentary body. They're responsible for overseeing government spending and making sure things are accountable.
Yeah.
And they've only met reportedly 6 times in the last 8 months.
Oh, wow.
And opposition lawmakers are really criticizing the chairperson. They're alleging deliberate delays in scheduling meetings
Okay.
to avoid scrutiny of potential financial irregularities in big projects like the Gautam Buddha and Pokhara International Airports, particularly regarding how the land was acquired for those projects.
So it raises concerns about transparency and accountability.
Yeah, absolutely. And the opposition members have even said that if the chairperson keeps postponing meetings, they might formally demand one. So there's definitely a sense of urgency there.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on, we saw that Prime Minister Oli has been focusing a lot on poverty alleviation.
Yes.
What are the main strategies being emphasized in this initiative?
Well, Prime Minister Oli has given a clear directive to the National Planning Commission, the NPC,
Okay.
to make poverty alleviation a top priority. And he's pushing for a multi-pronged approach. So that includes increasing domestic production, enhancing overall productivity,
Okay.
and encouraging entrepreneurship within the country.
Okay.
So he's really stressed the importance of promoting self-reliance among the people, making sure fundamental rights are met, and having effective systems in place to monitor national pride projects.
Right. So it's about making sure those projects are actually benefiting people
Exactly.
and also promoting growth within Nepal itself.
Yes, it's a two-pronged approach.
Absolutely. On a positive note, I was really happy to read about the start of petrol imports via the India-Nepal pipeline.
Oh, yeah. That's a really good development for Nepal's fuel supply.
Yeah.
The Nepal Oil Corporation, the NOC, has now started importing petrol from India using the Motihari-Amlekganj pipeline,
Okay.
which has already been used successfully for importing diesel since 2017.
Right.
So by switching petrol imports from those traditional tanker trucks to the pipeline, they're expecting to see a significant drop in transportation costs.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and it should also make the fuel supply more reliable and consistent across the country.
Which is great for both consumers and the economy as a whole.
Exactly.
Okay. We also saw that the Nepal Insurance Authority, the NIA, is planning to set up a judicial bench.
Yeah.
What's the thinking behind that?
Well, it seems like they're trying to address growing concerns about the delays in settling insurance claims, especially after the really devastating floods and landslides back in 2024.
Okay, right.
So by creating this dedicated judicial bench within the NIA, the aim is to speed up the process of resolving these disputes,
Okay.
providing a more specialized, transparent, and efficient system for handling these insurance-related legal matters.
Yeah, that sounds like a welcome move for anyone who's been waiting a long time for their insurance claims to be settled.
It does. It should bring some much-needed relief and efficiency to the system.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I did want to touch upon some of the political landscape,
Okay.
specifically some of the controversies that have surrounded President Paudel's 2 years in office.
Sure.
Can you give us a quick rundown of some of the key issues that have come up?
Sure. President Paudel's tenure has definitely been marked by some controversies.
Yeah.
These include debates around his pardoning of certain prisoners, the cost of his medical treatment,
Okay.
and some of the appointments he's made. His critics argue that in certain cases, his actions haven't been that different from the practices of previous presidents,
Right.
which have also drawn criticism in the past. So it seems like the office of the president continues to be under a lot of scrutiny.
Definitely. Okay. Shifting to the creative sector, we've seen some filmmakers expressing concerns about censorship. What's at the heart of this issue?
Filmmakers have been really vocal in condemning the censor board's actions lately,
Okay.
especially regarding Deepak Raniyar's film, Rajagunj.
Okay.
The board initially objected to a clip in the film that included a past statement made by Prime Minister Oli, and this led to them demanding that the film be edited.
Wow.
This whole incident has sparked a much wider debate within the Nepalese film industry about the current censorship policies,
Okay.
how appropriate they are, how they impact artistic expression and creative freedom.
It's a tough one because you have, the need for some sort of oversight,
Right.
but also the freedom of artistic expression.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance.
Yeah.
And filmmakers are arguing that these kinds of restrictions not only make it harder for them to tell their stories,
Yeah.
but they could also harm Nepal's reputation internationally when it comes to freedom of expression.
Yeah. Okay. Lastly, I wanted to touch on the bigger issue of Nepal's cultural identity.
Right.
I mean, we've seen some challenges, but also some encouraging developments. What's the overall picture?
It's definitely a mixed bag. On one hand, there's this very real concern about the erosion of Nepal's incredible cultural heritage.
Right.
We're talking about damage to historical and religious sites, the marginalization of indigenous languages.
Okay.
In fact, a staggering 37 are now considered critically endangered.
Wow.
And the decline of traditional performing arts. It's a lot to grapple with.
It is.
But there are also some really positive things happening. For example, recently we saw 48 Nepalese A-level students receive Outstanding Cambridge Learner Awards.
Wow.
So that shows the amazing potential and talent within the younger generation, who we hope will play a big part in preserving and promoting their culture. So it's really a blend of challenges and reasons for optimism.
It's like two sides of the same coin.
It is.
Well, that actually brings us to the end of our deep dive into what's happening in Nepal right now. I think it's pretty clear from everything we've talked about, from the economy and social issues to governance and cultural shifts, that all these different aspects are intertwined.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything's connected.
And for our listeners in the UK, if you're looking to connect with the Nepalese community there, find job opportunities, housing, or events, Make sure you check out blayet.uk. It's a great resource specifically for Nepalists living in the UK.
It is.
And for all our listeners worldwide, if you want to explore these topics in more detail and keep up with all the latest news and analysis, be sure to visit nepalidiaspora.net.
Yeah, you'll find a lot of great resources there.
Okay. So as we wrap up, here's a thought to leave you with. The world's becoming increasingly interconnected, right?
Yeah.
Information is constantly flowing across borders. So how can the Nepalese diaspora use their global reach and resources to make a real difference?
That's a good question.
Not just in terms of economic progress,
Right.
but also in preserving Nepal's rich cultural heritage. It's something for all of us to think about.
It is. It's a challenge and an opportunity.
Absolutely.
And it's one that we need to rise to.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll be back soon with more insights from the Nepalese Diaspora Network.
See you next time.